Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Guest. I'm an ANCA volunteer and a resident of Redlands. I've been volunteering with ANCA a little over a year now, and I am just so excited for this opportunity to be the MC to kick off our second year of educational programming here at the Community Center. As many of you, 2 years strong with some great events. As some of you may know, we have a program called Resilient Living. Through monthly talks, such as the one tonight, we will be providing how-to workshops and educational programming in hopes of educating everybody here in Redlands on how to better equip ourselves for the impacts of severe climate change. I think we can all acknowledge that these days climate change is real, it's here, and it's a major threat to life on Earth. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've been having a great time with these educational events. And if you're not familiar with ANCA, we're a nonprofit organization with growing numbers of volunteers that are deeply concerned about climate change and climate action. Our mission is to build community resilience by bringing neighbors together, very much at the local level through education and planned events. We hope you check out the information at the resource table. There's plenty to sign up, plenty to do, and plenty to learn. Tonight's event is going to be on the benefits of a local sustainable food system, and we have some fantastic speakers. So, some really exciting stuff. Not only is this our second year of educational programming through our Resilient Living series, but we've had some other major accomplishments. ANCA has received the Mayor's Award, was awarded this, and if you want to take a look at it, it's right over there, very recently. Last night, we did a presentation in front of City Hall, and several of the council members were effusive in just how much ANCA has done in the past year. We've got an online article in the Community Forward news publication just recently about all the great work that we've been doing. And there's compost grants to City of Livonia Gardens and Sustainable University of Redlands Farm. There's plenty going on and plenty to be excited about. As part of what we've done over the last year is create a vision for a climate resilient community. There's 10 initiatives, and our goal moving forward with this educational series is to highlight each one of these topics and continue to educate and coordinate community members to create a resilient community rallied around these initiatives. Now, the one that's most near and dear to my heart is our Neighborhood Action Forum. I believe this to be the heart and soul of ANCA, and I'd like to bring up Sarah to talk a little bit more about that.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all. How many of you have been to one of these sessions before in the past year? Awesome. So you're already very familiar with our organization, and you're very familiar with the second word in our title, neighborhood. That's a really big part of what we are trying to do here as an organization. And you've seen over the months, there's many really cool things that you can do on your own to, set yourself up for more climate resiliency. But imagine what you can do if we did it all collectively, and if we did maybe a few blocks of your neighbors actually doing all of these things together. Maybe you yourself can't dig up your lawn to make a more drought-tolerant front yard, but imagine if you had 20 of your neighbors to help you and how fast you could knock that out. Or maybe you can't grow an entire garden, but maybe you can grow a little parsley, and then your neighbor down the road has a little bit more space so they can do some butternut squash, and then a little bit down there you got some people doing onions, and you share it all and you got a soup going for everybody. So there's some really exciting things that we can do if we just think about it in the bigger span. And so I want to just point out that we have a flyer over there. It's 3 easy steps to forming your neighborhood. It's really approachable. It doesn't have to be scary. It's just, you're going to ask around, you're going to form a little team, talk to some neighbors, they talk to some neighbors, they talk to some neighbors, and then you have a big planning event so you can plan out a year's worth of action items based on what your neighborhood wants to do. We won't tell you what to do. We want you guys to decide what you want to do. But we help facilitate it all every step of the way. If you want more information, I'm right over there, but I hope to talk to you afterwards. Thanks.
And if Sarah's busy afterwards, you can feel free to come talk to me, Linda. A few other folks have already been in the process of developing a neighborhood forum, and it is fantastic. So now, turning to our topic tonight, we are going to be talking about sustainable agriculture, sustainable food systems. You may not know, or you may know that California is the agricultural capital of the United States. And many are working to connect growers with consumers to reduce distance food moves from growers to consumers. It's a process that reduces food waste, keeps land in production, and saves money. So our program tonight is going to highlight that, discuss that, get into more detail about that. We've been honored to have two great speakers who are going to be speaking. The first is Sue Struthers. Sue is the Riverside Neighbor of the Year. In addition, she's actively involved in building sustainable food systems in Riverside. She serves as the treasurer of the Riverside Food System Alliance, and she's on the board of the Riverside Food Cooperative, which serves to strengthen the community by providing access to local and healthy food. Sue retired from Sonoma County Library in 2013. She has an 18-year career with the Riverside Public Library, creating programs for youth and representing the library to community organizations. In addition to Sue, we'll be having Mandy Parks. Mandy's an ANCA volunteer, as well as the district manager at the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. That's an organization that's a public agency headquartered in Redlands and focuses on open space preservation, wildland rehabilitation, and education and outreach to residents within 1,300 square miles of public and private land in northwestern Riverside and southwestern San Bernardino counties. Mandy and the IERCD strengthen local food communities and systems by identifying and mapping agricultural lands and resources to match those interested farmers at multiple scales. The organization also promotes education and outreach to bring resources locally and reduce barriers, thus further strengthening our local food systems. So without further ado, I'll introduce Sue, our first speaker.
Okay, I'm delighted to be here tonight because food systems are something that I live and breathe every day. I love to eat. I grew up in a family that food was very important. I think my dad was the original foodie. If you don't know what that word means, look it up. We would be sitting watching television and Dad would say, let's hop in the car and go to San Diego so that we can eat at this restaurant. And we often did. So no, it wasn't very sustainable what he did that way, but it sure made our life lots of fun. So we're talking about food systems. Are you a part of a food system? Raise your hand if you are. Everyone's hand should be up. Do you eat? Do you buy groceries? Do you cook? You are part of the food system, and that is okay. So the term food system describes the interconnected systems and processes that influence food, health, community development, nutrition, and agriculture. It's all about food. How it's grown, how it moves to market, how it is processed before you eat it. And you might think we're not talking about whether it's turned into a French fry, but things have to be cleaned. Vegetables have to be cleaned, dirt has to be taken off before you buy it. It doesn't come, when you buy something at your produce aisle in your grocery store, and those carrots don't have any dirt, somebody washed it. It was not grown that way. It is how and where food is sold, how food waste is reduced, and honestly, most food waste comes in your home. It's something that the best way for you to fight that, combat that, is to pay attention to the quantity that you buy and the plan for eating something. The container size of something that you buy, when you buy stalks a head of celery, you want some in this salad, what are you going to do with the rest of it? And that should be a part of your planning, even if that means taking it over and sharing it with your neighbor. How all of that affects our climate and whether or not it grows your local economy. This is our current logo from the Riverside Food Systems Alliance. And we have approved, and we're in talks with the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District to form a group that will be the Inland Empire Food Systems Alliance for a sustainable Southern California. So that means that what I'm going to tell you tonight we're doing, you will be able to join, and it will be a larger part of all of our lives. We are a collaboration of groups working to improve access to local food. We want to assure the safety of local food, help small farmers sell their produce, increase their production, save money in how they grow it, create forums to share information from experts, discuss issues and solutions with other farmers. There's actually one going on in Norco tonight that we're putting on with CAF, the California Alliance of Family Farms, and farmers from a wide area were invited to come. And we also coordinate the Grow Riverside Annual Conference. Have any of you been to the? No, that's too bad. It really is tons of fun. We invite a famous farmer. Do you realize they're famous farmers? Joel Salatin, have you ever heard of him? Yeah. We had John Martin Fortier this year come and speak. Javier Zamora, who farms up in Aromas, California. It really is wonderful. So our partners are the Food Hub that is operated out of the RUSD. There you see is Riverside Unified School District. You have the same acronym for yours. We had a very visionary director of nutrition services in Riverside some years ago. They were remodeling the building, and he thought, if I add more refrigeration, I can create space for UC Riverside, our college, to come in and buy in larger quantities. They can save money and then come and pick it up from us. And he applied that to a number of things. And he also started delivering food to local daycare centers, Head Starts, and other kinds of things. All 40 of the Riverside Unified Schools have a salad bar with fresh produce. And they have had them since probably about 2007. Again, Rodney was a true visionary in that field. The Riverside Food Cooperative, which I'm also the treasurer of, that will be a member-owned brick-and-mortar grocery store that will carry as much local produce and product as we can. Of course, we don't commercially grow things like bananas or pineapple or mango, so that won't be a part of our mix. We don't have a dairy very locally, but it will be as much as can be local. The Riverside Food Rescue and Gleaners for Good, I'll plead guilty there too. Some friends of mine and I started gleaning because I would go to a meeting and people would say, you need to get the fruit out of people's backyards and take it to pantries. And I go to the next meeting and they go, you need to do that. And so I thought, maybe they really are talking about me. So 5 or 6 of us were going out picking oranges or grapefruit or whatever it was. It's mostly citrus in Riverside. So then that led to a grant from the state of California, and we started rescuing food with employees. So then we were able to get big gleans going. A lot of those have been in Redlands. You guys have lots of citrus too. And over the 3 years of that grant, we rescued and donated 450,000 pounds of citrus. So it didn't go into the landfill, which is good for our climate, and it fed people that wanted them. We avoided things like lemons and limes because that's not really food. Those are seasonings, they're wonderful, but you don't sit and eat a lime. But it was a remarkably successful program. Riverside University Health, which is our health department for the county, the city of Riverside was generous in helping us get this started. Various food pantries, including Inland Harvest The Riverside Corona Resource Conservation District, which is the equivalent of your IE RCD, and the Eat Cultural Center and Farmer Training. That is, we work with a nonprofit called 5 Keys, an adult education. So we have a farmer training program right now at 5 Keys. It started, this cohort of people learning to farm started at the beginning of April last year. And twice a week they come, they dig in the soil, they plant things, they learn what they're doing, there's some classroom time. We have still 50 of them that are going through this program. And most of them have a plan to become a farmer. And that program is free. So it's something that you know someone that wants to do. Keep it in mind. April of next year will be the next cohort of people who want to farm. These are the logos of the all of the people involved. You see the Department of Water Resources, USDA, CDFA, the California Climate Investments. They were the ones that paid for the food rescue. One of our first missions was to try to create a taste for local food. So you need to do that at farmers markets, produce stands, the co-op, of course, the Fresh and Local Guide, which is something that we have published when we have the money. This includes information about Redlands, by the way. This one is outdated. You're welcome to look through it, but it's not very helpful at this point. The Farm to Fork restaurants, the salad bars that are in our school districts, and then last year we had a really fun dinner we called the Taste of Riverside. It was a fundraising dinner for the farmer training. So restaurants came and brought food, donated that food, brought it in, and then people paid to come and have a really good time. We had live music. It was great. This is a picture of the 5 Keys. All of your local food, all of food anyway, starts with seeds in the ground. This is a hands-on farmer training, and we have just gotten enough money to hire a Spanish language instructor for next year. These are pictures from a growers forum. Growers get together and perhaps they talk about the citrus psyllid, should they stay in citrus, should they move to avocados, those kinds of, and experts come and talk to you. And this was our logo from Grow Riverside and Beyond. We don't know what it will be next year, but we're hoping it will be Inland Empire. Farm safety training is incredibly important because the safety of food starts on the farm. When you heard about the large romaine recall a few years ago, that was from Salinas. Do you know why? That was on the farm, and it was farm specific when that hit. And it was because manure from animals up above in the watershed came in, and it wound up in the water stream for the lettuce. So when people tell you, you see a recall on television, and they go, oh, I can't have any more salad, I can't have any more romaine. If you go to your farmer's market, you can, because that lettuce does not come from Salinas, it comes from your local farms. Uh-oh.
We're going to try to record.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so why is local food that important? Do you know why? Does it taste better?
Yes.
Yeah, a whole lot better to me. It stays fresher usually while over, in your refrigerator. You might try that. Buy something at the grocery store that is probably already 5 to 7 days old, has been picked that long ago by the time you purchase it at a major supermarket. Try it next to one that you buy at your farmer's market. There are fewer miles on that produce. It didn't travel from all over in order to get to you. How many of you have walked into your local supermarket, the big ones, and they say, we sell local food? You see that sign?
Yeah.
You know what their definition of local food is?
300 miles.
500 miles. Get out a map. run to see where your 500 miles gets you. And it ain't local. That's not by my definition at any rate. So I had an experience. I was I watched the Julie and Julia movie when I lived in Sonoma County, and I was walking home, and I happened to my apartment was on the other side of a Whole Foods, so I thought, oh, I better get something for my lunch tomorrow at work. I was not paying attention. I got some apples. I lived in apple country. Sebastopol is apple country. I got home and I looked, and the apple said, grown in Chile. Terrific, you know. So it's really, you need to pay attention. So we've talked about most of the things that we do. Right now, we are, the other thing I wanted to touch on is the supply chain. Do you remember in COVID when you couldn't buy things at the grocery store? One of the solutions to that is creating a robust supply chain. Just 1 minute, and we will ask questions. So during the rains of last year, we all remember those, don't we? And in the Central Valley, there was lots of flooding up there, and they lost lots and lots of produce. And as Erin said, yes, California and the Central Valley in particular, as you drive, it's a salad bowl of the world, it's the artichoke capital of the world, it's the garlic capital of the world. And people were calling from up there to our food hub because all of their romaine was gone and they could not get any. So it is important, not that we have it when other people can't, but it is important to have various sites where it's being grown. In case this one is bad, then we should be able to get it over here. And not that we're hoarding that, although we don't grow enough to replace what they grow in Salinas because they have a monstrous sort of volume that we couldn't possibly. They have the big industrial farms, and we don't. And we don't aspire to big industrial farms. So I wanted to touch just a tiny bit before we move on. You may not see the rest of my slides. One is that we currently won a California Department of Food and Ag food hub. Our food hub did for local food, $500,000 to purchase local food. And the city of Riverside funneled $2 million through the food hub to buy produce and other food to deliver to food pantries. So we don't have enough growers to supply that. So many of those items come from farther away just because it simply isn't available. And right now, we also are the recipient of a subaward through a USDA grant to energize regional food businesses. That could be a bakery. It could be someone who aspires or is making salsas that they want to sell, yogurt, tofu, any number of things. Not necessarily farming, but food businesses as they are related. And we will have the ability to give people grants. And this is regional. It's not just Riverside. So it will be covering a broad area. And we are in the process, and possibly as a partner with the IERCD, in applying for an urban ag grant, which will be focused the same way. And that one will be specific to farmers. So that if a farmer needs a hoop house, a greenhouse, a produce stand, any number of things like that, they could in fact apply for this. We would determine whether it's viable, whether it would help them earn money. So the USDA is very specifically looking to support local ag and local growers. And one of the really beautiful things about a food hub is that Scott, who runs it, has the ability to say, they'll say, well, gee, what should I be putting in the ground right now? What will you be buying? Broccoli? Carrots? those are the kinds of things I buy. Someone came to him a few years ago and said, I've got an acre of basil. Can you buy that? No. Can you imagine what a school district would do with an acre of basil? I can't. It just doesn't work. So all of these things that we have created work in a very circular pattern. Many of the people who are involved in one are involved in the other. So we'll go to this one. These are some of the vendors, the farms that sell to RUSD's Food Hub. We have consumer access to local produce. You have farmers markets. Do you ever notice that all the farmers markets all the farmers at your markets are not from Redlands? Did you ever notice that?
Yes.
Do you know why? We don't grow stone fruit commercially, so we don't have a ready access for farmers that have a big supply of peaches and plums and that sort of thing. They have to come from out of town. And there are a few other things like that. That is the way that it goes. The Riverside Food Co-op sells a monthly box of produce to our members. We're doing that this Sunday. This was the one that was in February. I just looked at the list for this month and I'm very excited what we will have. Cooperatives are member-owned businesses. That means all of the profits from that store belong to the shoppers and the members that own that store. When you flash your card through Walmart, how long do you think that takes to get that money back to Bentonville, Arkansas? I'll bet it's there before you get your groceries home. So that's why a food co-op, because it is hyper local and the money is ours, the money we spend. Cooperatives develop and support local producers, and again, that isn't only growers. It is people who make products. It could be someone who makes tortillas. In the Davis Food Co-op, you will find fresh pies on their shelves that someone is baking and bringing in. It makes life, to me, just a little bit more fun. We support, most co-ops support local nonprofits, and they operate in greener ways with more recycling than a traditional grocery store. And we are working on a future store. I don't know if any of you are concerned by the merger of the two very large grocery stores, what that will mean. I don't know what it means, but everything really except Stater Brothers will be a part of that chain. So I certainly would disincentivize bargains and competitive. That even includes, Food for Less is one of those stores. So Gleaners for Good, that was the original little handmade sort of thing, and that helps feed people in need. If we have any leftovers from the co-op, they go out to the food pantry on Monday morning. We distribute that on Sunday. It goes to the food pantry Monday morning. Last year, more than $2.5 million was spent on local produce since May of 2017 by our food hub. And that doesn't even include the additional that I was telling you about. I wrote this for Grow Riverside. The co-op spends between $2,700 and $3,000 each month with our local farms. Jobs are created with that money. The money spent in local businesses circles through your community. Farmers have kids. Those kids take lessons. They wear clothes that are purchased. They need new shoes. They go to doctors. They go to dentists. Your money goes through your neighborhood, and it truly helps your local economy. It doesn't matter whether it's food you're buying or hardware. It just doesn't make any difference. So we all vote by where we spend our dollars every time we buy something. And Amazon is not it. Okay. You had a question?
It wasn't a question, it was when you were talking about COVID, I belonged to a CSA that was local, and they just delivered our boxes
Right.
during COVID.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to go to the grocery store at all.
And we did the same thing. COVID was very good for our box subscription program. We also had money from the city of Riverside through the food hub and through the co-op to take produce to people who were, take food to people who were very high risk. And then the USDA came in with boxes, and they had very prescribed boxes. It had to have milk, it had to have meat, it had to have, X, Y, Z. So, but it did get people fed, and I think we're all grateful to have had that reaction. It helped our farmers earn money and stay in business, and then it certainly helped people from finding these dead people in their houses starved to death. It just wasn't going to do. So, yeah. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, what's your range? How far from Riverside do you deliver?
We only
14 miles from your place.
we only deliver in the city of Riverside because it's all volunteers. All of my time that I spend, I do that as a volunteer. We just can't, do more than that. We're getting very close to opening a store. We thought we had a site, and now I heard last night that we may not have that site, so we are. And then it will be a store you can walk in and you can shop at. It will be wonderful, truly wonderful.
So I'm new to this area, and it appears to me, I know that San Bernardino is the largest county in the U.S., but population-wise, Riverside seems to have, it's like triple. I can't even do the math that fast because
Right.
of this number of zeros. And yes, so it seems to me that you have more access as far as applications for grants.
No, I don't think so, truly. A lot of grants are based on economic factors. So poorer communities have a greater, they get sort of points for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So actually, San Bernardino and other, they should do very well in getting grants.
So I think the issue is that you have many more people who have been doing this. So I think it's great that you're sharing the information because there are people here who do not have those skills, do not have those contacts, and I do know that there are other conservancies that haven't, in Redlands, that haven't been listed, in the book. So I don't know whether that's then on their part because they're so small, they haven't yet contacted you, or they don't want to. I don't know. I'm trying to.
And we don't either. But this year after Grow, my phone would not stop ringing. People would say, how can we do what you're doing? We want to do what you're doing. Suddenly there is a shift. And I think perhaps COVID is responsible for that. Did it upset your view of the world? It did mine. I thought that life is not the same still as it was before COVID. How freely I could travel, how freely I could go into a movie theater, a restaurant, a grocery store without worrying about who I was coming in contact with. I could hug my friends. I could go to book clubs. And suddenly life became a computer screen in front of us. And I think we all got a little bit hungry for community, for making connections. And I don't think that's a bad thing, honestly. I mean, COVID was horrible, but I don't think community is a terrible thing. You were talking about your neighbors. One of my neighbors and I we suddenly had a bunch of new people on our street. We did a block party. I just printed something on my computer, we put it on everybody's door that wasn't home, and almost everyone showed up. And it was really fun, and it really vitalized our neighborhood. So I would highly recommend that too. And you like to eat anyway. So.
Are there going to be like any gardeners, not farmers per se, but gardeners, people who have enough land that they grow enough that they would be part of your group that gets to have that store?
You mean to sell us produce?
Yeah, or do you sell each other produce or do you trade each other?
No, we don't. A lot of my friends are master gardeners, and our Riverside Corona Resource Conservation District is the home of the Master Garden program, and they do lots of events, usually, sometimes it seems like every week, talking about it. But in Riverside County, in order to sell your homegrown produce, you need a license from the health department. It's a very simple, the last I looked, it was still a free license, but they ask you questions. Do you have dogs that are allowed under your fruit trees that are going to poop there? They're trying to keep you from killing your neighbors. I don't know, but you're in a different county, so I don't know how San Bernardino does that. But it's simple enough.
Yeah, so I just wanted you to know that in our vision board here, the vision element, building a local sustainable food system, that's gotten the most dots. We have some of covered dots. And that is the thing that people are most concerned about for some of the reasons you said. Bare shelf in the grocery stores. We read almost every day about agriculture being impacted in some part of the world. I'm just wondering about the local, I don't know if you really know this, but from our local growers around here, how are they experiencing the impacts of climate change and what kind of adaptations are they having to make?
We haven't heard much issue. Of course, we had 3 years of drought, and then last year we had a ridiculous amount of water coming down. So I know that individual farms were affected by that. But I don't know that it was a widespread, certainly not like the floods that just happened in Libya. We didn't have anything like that, or anything up in the Central Valley. But it's worth thinking about. I notice that when it gets very hot, I have blueberries in a barrel that I grow in my yard, and I have to cover it up in the summer. And I didn't have to a few years ago. It didn't quite get that hot. So, that's one little barrel. I'm not trying to grow them commercially, yeah. So we have 3 more minutes. I don't know. I don't think I really had anything that I did not hit. But, I think that it just is something we all need to think about.
Great presentation. I think there's some other elements too that if you want to address. We also know that, for example, processed foods and ultra-processed foods are like health demons, right? And so part of buying local is not only it's fresher, but the nutritional value. And even like recently, by the way, there's a lot of news stories now coming out about that cigarette manufacturers had purchased a lot of food companies and literally had used the same type of addictive principles, like with nicotine, to create incentives for overconsumption, discourages public health through higher levels of obesity. So there's actually a lot of rich reasons, right, to go and buy it locally.
Yeah. And I would bet that you could find people that if you started really enjoying local food that would be happy to come and do potluck with you. It would make them happy too.
I don't know if too many people know this, but we have an amazing glut of food in California.
Oh, yes, we do.
And it's, we have I think the statistic I heard was 40% of our food is thrown away.
I've heard 40, but who knows?
But anyway, regardless of what it is, could be more, could be less. But, and then 80% of our, see, this is directly related to water because 80% of our water, well, let's just say, put it this way, 20% is what we personally use for showers, watering our yard, cleaning our cars, whatever we use at home. And 80% goes for growing food.
Yeah.
And if we waste 40%, we actually threw away 40% of the water, well, 40%, twice as much as we actually use. So there is no water shortage. That's the truth that nobody wants to say. There is no water shortage. There is a water waste problem. No water shortage problem at all.
But I'm a firm believer after working in food rescue that much of the food waste is in your own house. It is how much you buy, that you overbuy. And you know, we all have time, we go to the grocery store and we come home and then we get sick. So maybe that didn't get cooked, but you know, that's not what we're talking about.
I actually disagree with that. The biggest waste, and I've seen this personally because I worked in the school system, almost 70 to 90% wasted, especially with the Obama food thing. That just was, I don't know if they're still doing it. That was a big, huge waste. And then every single restaurant throws tons of food away every single day. You know, I mean.
Well, restaurants shouldn't be throwing food away that wasn't on your plate.
Well, that's true, but that's the thing. See, when you're in a restaurant, okay, if you're at home, you can put it away, put it in your refrigerator. At home, people don't want to mess with it. It's convenient. It's not, they're not going to mess with it. They're going to leave it on the plate.
Well,
even if they take
you're
2 bites.
you're asking me to teach you how to make people more responsible.
No,
And I don't know how to do that.
I'm not asking anything, but
I don't
I'm
know.
just explaining. Yes, I'm bringing it on the table, but I'm not actually asking for you to solve it. But I think we have to realize, though.
Oh,
that
I
this is
think
the problem.
many of us do. And I have neighbors that I see their sprinklers going in the rain. It makes me crazy. Do I get over and punch them so that they won't ever speak to me again? I can't quite do that. You know, we all have to live with who we are. You can try very gently to suggest, gee, could I remind you when it's going to rain so that you would turn your sprinklers on? How do we make other people behave better? So I think I'm out of time, so I'm gonna.
The city, they're planning to make it illegal to throw food away. Have you heard of that?
No, and again, we don't have time to
I know, that would be
address
hard to do.
So, I mean, I don't know who the they is in your question.
The city.
Okay, okay. So I'm handing this to you, Mandy.
I'll put another hand for Sue. It took her 40 minutes to get here. She's a volunteer. Really appreciate her being out here tonight. Thank you. And then I really wanted to introduce myself. Others, hopefully that stays up. I'm Mandy Parks. I'm with the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. And when we started thinking about the workshop tonight and thinking about keeping it local, we really thought about the fact that there are 2 levels of keeping it local. One is Sue's level, where she's really been fundamental in building a working, functioning, multi-level food infrastructure where there's a lot of systems in place that are addressing just huge problems like food waste, lack of food availability, things that she presented on tonight, and I think it's really, really important to think about those things. But when we talk about, people being more responsible or people acting, I think one of the barriers to acting is just kind of it feeling a little bit insurmountable. You have to manage your job, maybe your children, maybe your home, with the myriad of things we all manage. And then on top of that, you have to understand where your food's coming from, and you have to know how to cook it, and how to properly preserve it, and how to compost, and I think the list gets so long that before you know it, you're in your car on the way to Bonds, and just kind of getting up for that week, and thinking you're going to do it again next week. So when we thought about what we were going to talk about tonight, Sue kind of gave this higher level conceptual presentation and really talked about a lot of things. I didn't even know all the things that you guys are doing. It's really wonderful. And then I'm really talking a little bit more about what my agency is doing to support sustainable ag and kind of start to bring in more local food systems function. But then on another level, talking about applications of what Sue's talking about. How do we enter the food system? What are things that we can do to really get in and make sustainable long-term change? It's like anything, adopting an exercise routine, and anything that's different that you intend to do, you have every single intention to get done, just takes a little bit of not just planning, but also realistic adoption. You really have to be able to do it. How do I advance? This thing, or the same thing? Okay. But first, of course, has anyone heard of the IERCD? If no one in ANCA can raise their hand, I know you guys know what IERCD. Okay. I always start talking about that because it is not the most familiar organization, even though Sue was talking about our counterpart, our sister agency in Riverside. But I think a lot of people think we're a nonprofit, and we're actually a government agency. We're headquartered in Redlands, and we, like other special districts, are providing a specific set of services within our district boundaries. Like many resource conservation districts, there's about 100 of them statewide, we follow a geographic boundary where there's going to be a lot of interaction in systems. It makes a lot of sense for large-scale project work, collaboration, grant writing, project execution, but our roots are really in agriculture. We began as just in response to the devastation of the Dust Bowl, and in a longer presentation, I've got some great Dust Bowl slides. Just the realities of it was really a sobering time, a really destructive, awful time. And one of the most important things was people realized there really was no large-scale federal funding source, not just to encourage people to do the right thing, not just to provide on-farm technical assistance for better resource conservation, but also to incentivize adoption of those practices. We know that for ever, agricultural producers are subject to all kinds of things, weather, fluctuations in the market. I mean, so many things that they're dealing with. The very last thing they're going to do probably is put out funding for something that really isn't a sure thing. So the idea was understanding we really needed at a federal level to begin gathering funding, making that funding available. Of course, when you think about natural resources, it really isn't the best suited to be done at a federal level. So one by one, states began adopting code. In California, our code was adopted in the late 1930s, and it allowed for formation of what were then soil conservation districts, now resource conservation districts. And the entire idea was built upon connecting federal money, connecting the federal government to the actual hyper-local needs of producers. What were people's concerns? What did they need? And how can you really make money work from coming in federally and then being put on the ground? So it's a really critical, really critical service that we still do. And that was one of the things I wanted to just super quickly touch on, especially just to build off of what Sue was talking about, that we still, on a daily basis, are out assisting farmers in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. Only today, we do it in Spanish. We have 2 women that are fully bilingual that are out doing technical assistance. We're talking about a lot more than erosion. We're talking about a lot more than drought. But really, we exist to, in that area anyway, our whole purpose is really to get out and understand what people need so that they can continue to stay in farming. One of the biggest threats in our area, beyond everything we've already talked about, is also loss of land to development. It's a very real thing. Land, I know it's someone in this room, land is very valuable here. Many farmers are on leases and lease their land from owners who maybe their families have held that land forever. And as sales continue, and sometimes I hate to say it, but there are certain environmental regulations that do make farming at times a little bit teetering, kind of on the edge of difficult. You do see people leaving and going somewhere else or to something else. And so those are all things that I think for our agency are really, really important. But in addition to that, like all RCDs in the state, we do other things, and just the photo is meant to kind of show a little bit more. The bottom left is obviously on-farm technical assistance, but bottom right is a tree survey. We do a lot of forest health and fire resiliency work. The top left is a lot of our habitat work is done in and around this area, but going out to Beaumont Banning, out to Chino Hills, planting natives, removing invasives, and trying to establish connections between habitat, preserved habitat. And then the top right is just a photo of a site that we've been working on in Harupa, an environmental education center. So we do a lot of things. If you stop by our table today, there's some flyers, there's some bags. I would love to talk with you if you are interested in adding your CD, would like just to learn more about what we do. Obviously, I can talk about it all day long. Also want to bring up Where to Del Valle. They were going to be here tonight. We're not able to be here. But they're another important organization. They are a nonprofit, and they're somebody who's been a core partner of IURCD for a long time. They're in Ontario is their kind of flagship location, but they've also got locations in Harupa and Glen Avon. And their mission is not just sustainable agriculture, it's not just making sure that they're using regenerative practices to for long-term soil health. They're also looking at income levels and kind of extending and expanding food availability to everybody. And that's a really exciting thing, because I think it's something maybe we don't always think about, is that sometimes the problem is where we're buying food or how local our food is, or whether or not we've done our research, our homework that week. For many people, it's obviously lack of availability for people in food deserts, and for a lot of the people they serve, just they're a little bit priced out. So they have an amazing mission and some great programs. They also provided, we've got 4 raffle prizes tonight, 2 gift certificates for one of their produce baskets, and then 2 actually produce baskets so I guess it's, have you done your shopping yet? Are you ready for some veggies? They're beautiful. They were just picked today, to Sue's point. We're gonna raffle those off later. Oh no. Ah. I think I already messed this up. It's weird, it's like sticking aside. Do you see that? Oh, I see, okay. That's okay, we can just, I'll just talk about that one. Okay. Well, there's a little formatting issue. So the next slide is just kind of going back to what we're here to talk about. Why did everybody come out tonight? What are we looking at? Thinking about just the incredible high-functioning ability to connect to the larger food system Sue was talking about, thinking about bringing it to the Inland Empire, that we're all part of one, but we certainly have an opportunity and make choices to participate in the one that maybe is a little bit better for the environment, has real climate benefits, and involves a lot less for us to think about once we make that shift. There's food everywhere in California. We already talked about that, but it is everywhere. We, produce an amazing amount in all of our counties, specialty crops, everything and anything that you can think of. Food is there, ready for consumption. A lot of it ends up leaving the state, and we do want to show. We want it here. We want to connect with it. We want to eat things that were harvested same day if possible. But then also, just to get back to how, that we really want to think about, that it is daunting and overwhelming, but in the next kind of set of slides, we're going to go over just what we can do in a way that feels accessible. And nobody, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of pressure to just adopt an entirely new lifestyle, think about things completely differently, but I think even just doing one of these things, even thinking about one of them, even maybe extending what you do a little bit further is a step in the right direction for more sustainable habits. So obviously I'm not blowing anyone's mind that there's a farmer's market in Redlands. I know people are aware of that. In fact, there's 2, and not the most fascinating thing. But I think one interesting thing, and Sue touched on this, is I think when we're younger and not as aware of the difference in local food and where we have traditionally shopped, that there is such a huge difference in taste. There's also a huge difference in nutrition. As things are harvested and density starts to break down, we're also not getting the same things from our food when it travels and sits on a shelf. But there is something really comforting about the market and about the way we've always done things. So we have to kind of get ourselves out of our comfort zone. And as everybody knows, it's not just produce. Both of these markets, the Grove School Market and the Downtown Redlands Market, have more than just produce. They have all kinds of local products. At the Grove School Market, they sell fish and chicken. They sell all kinds of things. They're both, oh, eggs, someone said? Yes, I think, and they're both, they sell eggs. But the term certified means that produce is brought straight from the farm, either by the farmer or somebody, I think, either connected to them, somebody in their family. Only California grown produce can be certified. And then at both markets, there are certified organic. Not everybody is organic though, especially not at the Grove School. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy from people. I think sometimes people aren't confused about what organic means, but I think if you can choose to patronize somebody who is producing in a way that is less impactful on land, you should do it if you can. If you can't, certainly just being at the farmer's market is enough. But it's just a choice, and they have gone through a certification process. They're doing those practices, and you can see it on their booth when you walk up. And there's also at the Redlands Market, the downtown market, CalFresh program participants get a one-to-one market match. So if anybody you know is participating in that program, it's dollar for dollar up to $20, and there's a city booth to help you. So it's set up for people to just get down there and start shopping. But I don't know if anyone ever gets to the farmer's market and looks like this lady. That has happened to me before, where you're just, it's overwhelming. And if you don't think about it, you don't plan, there's so many things going on. And it ends up, I think a lot of the time you overbuy and you end up wasting. So one of the things to think about is planning. Thinking about what's in season. The Southland Farmers Market Association and probably RFSA has seasonality. If you go on their website, they have really, really comprehensive lists of what you can expect to help you plan. But both those markets have a really great selection of produce. And then beyond that, thinking about bringing bags, even bringing a cart, just something to kind of help you take a break, kind of catch your breath, get your shopping done. And then at both of them, I'm not a huge social media user, but looking at following them on social media, both markets, there's special events, there's special things that they're doing that you might miss out on otherwise. So just kind of nice to keep up on those things, make sure that you're down, taking a walk, maybe starting at the very beginning or very end of the market when there's not as many people, and talking to the farmers. I think that's something that maybe not everybody does. Talk to the farmers. They want to talk about what they're growing. They would love to give you a sample. They would love to tell you all about what tastes best, what's the freshest. So, that's probably the easiest thing that I'm sure a lot of us are already doing. The other thing I think that's really easy if you're not a farmer's market person is patronizing restaurants that are supporting farm-to-table food. So La Palata, La Palata sources from Jacinto and Three Sisters Farms. And there are a ton of restaurants and also little like ice cream shops, coffee shops that do this, but it's another one. It's pretty easily accessible information that's sourced locally, and it's a really, really easy way to kind of tap in and make sure that you're supporting people that are doing it the right way. In addition to restaurants and these stores, there's also somewhat of an availability. I think you were talking about Riverside Unified has a much more comprehensive connection to farm to table. Redlands Unified is connected to Old Grove Orange, if people are familiar with them. They're down in San Tim, they're beginning, I think, looking at agritourism, trying to expand, contributing to CSAs, but they also supply Redlands Unified schools with oranges, and if it's something that your children go to, you're involved with, it's certainly something to ask about to see if you can get them to your school. This is really interesting. I don't know if you guys have worked much with food prints, but this is a really, really interesting organization that I know about because they use resource conservation districts as technical service providers. And it's kind of another level of involvement that you may or may not, be ready for, but this might be something, especially if you're not aware of it, it's really looking at solutions for food system choices. So looking at just all of the emissions associated with our food system and knowing, those are things that we really can't change. Zero Food Print is a San Francisco-based organization that was started by 2 chefs. They really wanted to calculate and track the carbon footprint of food, not just meals, but kind of the annual output of restaurants. What are people doing? What is their output? Are they aware? And then what is the power of restaurants to maybe start making changes? And so working, I think, locally at first and then expanding. They're in Colorado now, also in Southern California. They really wanted restaurants to kind of have a 2-step process where they acknowledge their food print, they understand kind of with all of their inputs and production, this is really what they're responsible for, and then 2, have them think about how to mitigate that. And so one of the things that you can do, which is interesting, is restaurants can become members of Food Print and they can opt in to do a small surcharge. I know people hate that word when they're dining out, and it's very upsetting to some people. Tiny cents on your check. It's not a lot, and part of individual restaurants taking responsibility for their food print is that money goes into a pool, and then the other option is kind of creating a carbon credit plan for their restaurant. But this is the much more interesting one. So thinking about getting funding and addressing what I've been talking about earlier, that farmers are aware of what they should be doing, funders are aware, people, I think some are aware, some are not, of what conservation practices on property they do. This creates this funding pool that becomes a competitive grant process for producers in California and Colorado. That lets them switch to what we call an extractive form of agriculture to a regenerative form. And so what's interesting about that is, I think the incentive now really to try and make money, I think qualifying for subsidies, there's all kinds of incentives for farmers to produce at large scales, especially as our population puts more pressure on people. Funding is always kind of a question. There isn't a lot of room to approach farming in a regenerative way. And so this kind of program gives funding for planning, for getting people out in front of the problem, thinking about staffing, equipment, systems. They're going to start putting practices in place that maintain soil health through avoiding tilling, avoiding use of certain chemicals, letting soil rest, just continuing to build soil health even while producing. So it's just kind of, this graphic just shows kind of money from member restaurants coming all the way to carbon farming is what they're calling it, and then having technical assistance providers that are experienced in this kind of programming, helping out with actually boots on the ground work. So they've done over 70 projects, they've collected $1.2 million, and they've done some really interesting things, changing up one project in particular, and I'm sure this will be funded more and more, is changing grazing into a lighter, less intensive form, just by moving herds, by allowing plants to kind of reestablish, allowing microorganisms to reestablish in the soil. You end up with a much more functional, easily manageable, and then also taking carbon out of the atmosphere where it's harmful and sequestering it into the soil where it's actually really beneficial. But this kind of goes back to what can we do? It's great, Zero Food Print's great, but there's, the closest restaurant to us is in Alhambra. There's really nothing near us. We're not going to drive to Alhambra to go to dinner. It doesn't make any sense. But you can invite your favorite food-focused institution to become a member of Zero Food Print. If you patronize any sort of progressive organization in Redlands and you think, or in your area where you think they would be interested in becoming a member, considering their carbon impact, and really in a voluntary way participating and getting certified. They have something on their website, you just click a button and it's a very, very easy process to submit a request. If you do end up visiting a member restaurant or store, you can tag them on social media, and they also take donations. It's a really incredible organization doing so much for the environment. And it's just, again, another kind of example of direct action that is really, really easy and accessible to all of us. So Sue also touched on CSA programs, and I mentioned earlier Huerta del Valle has a community-supported ag program. I think a lot of us know what those are. Resources I wanted to bring up tonight, if you end up looking, there's a couple of local farms, Goodie Farms in Cherry Valley, Huerta del Valle, kind of Ontario, Harupa, are both taking signups. Not everyone is, but if you look at localharvest.org, you can put in anything and not just find a CSA program, you can find a farm stand. There's a lot of information about your specific location and what you're looking for. If this is something that's too much, if you don't need a whole box of produce, you don't even need half a box, I don't know, maybe people aren't looking at that entire box, they are kind of getting a headache instead of seeing something exciting is okay. Huerta, HDV takes donations. You can donate a produce box for a family in need. So if you can't use it yourself, it's $35 a box. They would be excited to get your donation and fund a family in need getting their own produce box, which is really not quite as diverse as this box, but it's pretty close. And then they also have kind of partial subscriptions. There's some different options, but it's certainly something that helps. And then growing your own food. This is another thing I'm not sure everybody thinks about, wants to do, but it's certainly possible. When you look at that plan, I know, like, my eyes crossed, it's not something that I think I'm, really, really good at, but there are so many ways that you can get into growing your own food, especially if you're in a small space, even for somebody that doesn't have a lot of technical background. I don't know if people got to stop by the Master Gardeners table, but if you see Betty Richards back there, she agreed to come tonight and volunteer. The Master Gardeners are kind of an underused resource, I think. I'm not sure if everybody's even aware of where they are, what they do, how to interact with them. But they're somewhere every weekend. They have tons of resources online. They have a direct email. They have a direct phone number. It's really, really simple to get in touch with them, explain what you'd like to do, and get somebody helping you. Most of them, I think, are retired and have taken this on as kind of their passion project. They want to help. You're really, really excited. So, but even for somebody like me who's not necessarily, have a lot of history growing food, creating a simple raised bed, going to one stop in Santon, filling it up, and then rotating things out with varying degrees of success. It's still something that you can do to kind of offset your impact and try to make sure you have what you need. And then this is, I think my final idea is just getting involved in donating. And this is something Sue touched on also, that she's been involved in gleaning, which is really important, otherwise the crop just kind of goes to waste. This is a little bit more about sharing with your neighbors. I've seen a couple of just like little free libraries, little free stands, if you've seen that, which is really cool. And then there's some interesting resources if you know you're going to have a surplus, you feel like you're going to have one. Ampleharvest.com or .org allows you to search by location, open donation days, and that also helps reduce food waste. So finally, this might have been taken at Grow Riverside, I'm not sure, but these are some of our partners at the County of San Bernardino that are all working in organic, local, sustainable ag. And they all, contributed ideas to this. We were talking about what we would do. But it's just a list of what you could do. Everything from visiting your farmer's market to donating your food, making sure you're looking at food waste. And more than anything, I think sharing messaging with people in your life that maybe don't know about it, trying to introduce them and get them. It'd be great to see people here talking about it, people in our lives that aren't already really engaged thinking about it. Just as a way to continue kind of spreading the message and really, I think harnessing the power of people to strengthen what our local food system could be. So, I think I'm at time, so.
what a great job for our speakers. Let's give them another round of applause. Okay, everyone, I brought our speakers up here. We have about 3 to 5 minutes for questions. So hopefully you gathered the best ones. We have a microphone, mine's holding in the back. If you want to line up there, again, we have time for maybe about 3 to 5 minutes of questions. Or if you just want to yell it out, feel free.
I wanted to recommend the movie Kiss the Ground about regenerative farming. If you haven't seen that, if you have an opportunity, take a look at it. It is very inspirational. So, we showed it at an event. We talked it into letting us do that. Occasionally, I think you can find it. It's just Kiss the Ground. And it is about regenerative farming and how farms have been regenerated by the method. I don't think I mentioned that we had grants for our farmers to apply for through us to get an allotment of compost. We had 12 farms, $135,000 that they could apply for compost, spread it on their crops, which of course saves water and sequesters carbon. So all of those things are ways of making ag more sustainable.
I was just, that just sparked a question. I was just wondering, did either one of your programs offer any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like grants for being able to organize your neighborhood to do compost? Because nobody composts here.
Oh my goodness.
I did a question.
They do, I know that our RCD occasionally offers a compost class. Do you do that?
Yeah, well, we actually had Haley from Desert Compost who presented here come and do a workshop, which was really great. But that's something I think we do a lot of mini grants at our district, and so if it was something you came up with, that'd be something we should talk about afterwards and just see if we could purchase materials, just anything to kind of keep that idea going. That's a really good idea.
When they do the worm composting at University of Redmond, maybe they can do another seminar. And it's not that difficult to, and if you kill the worms, you can always go to one of the county parks and buy more worms because they have them there for fishing. So, okay.
So all good tips.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, like I think like when I was a kid, right? You are what you eat was one of the things. But it's actually goes far beyond that, it seems like. You also have moral and ethical responsibilities to what you're doing to the food system. And are you like, the whole world since after World War II has been going towards more of a global system. We've reduced excise taxes to make goods and services flow, but look at the carbon impacts are. And so when we buy from far away, we might be paying exploitive labor practices for farm workers in countries that we feel disconnected, but we're paying for that. Paying for all the transportation costs that are heating up the planet. And so I really admire what you're doing, trying to get us back to kind of a more sustainable footprint that respects local communities and builds our relationships with each other and gets us more local and healthy on a lot of levels. Because we're not only just what we eat, we also have to own up to the responsibilities of what we're doing with our food purchases.
And truly, it's not only food. It's things like fast fashion that wind up in the landfills very quickly. It is something, we think if we take it to a thrift store that makes it okay, and it does not. So yeah, I don't know. I think the sense of community that comes from that, and the sense of your neighbors, it starts in your neighborhood, but your community is much larger. You had mentioned earlier about Riverside being a larger city. We are about 340,000 people. I don't know what your population is.
So it's almost 5 times the size.
In the whole county?
Well, no, you're talking about Riverside compared to Redlands. If it's 340,000 and we have
No, Riverside City is about 340.
So it's about 5 times, almost 5 times the size population-wise of Redlands.
Okay, yeah.
Not quite, but, right, but.
But you know, there are plenty of people who care about the future. I would say that. There are lots and lots of people who do. And you know, if you build your family life around food and your social life around food, you will find those people.
I'm excited for food. I'm thinking about dinner right now, so. 4 announcements before we go. Friendly reminder, we're trying to make an effort to reduce paper. Oh, one more big round of applause for our speakers.